Kopi Luwak, or civet coffee, refers to the seeds of coffee berries once they have been eaten and defecated by the Asian palm civet. The name is also used for marketing brewed coffee made from the beans. Producers of the coffee beans argue that the process may improve coffee through two mechanisms, selection and digestion. Selection occurs if the civets choose to eat coffee berries containing better beans. Digestive mechanisms may improve the flavor profile of the coffee beans that have been eaten. The civet eats the berries for the beans' fleshy pulp, then in the digestive tract, fermentation occurs. The civet's proteolytic enzymes seep into the beans, making shorter peptides and more free amino acids. Passing through a civet's intestines, the beans are then defecated with other fecal matter and collected. The traditional method of collecting feces from wild civets has given way to intensive farming methods in which civets in battery cage systems are force-fed the coffee beans. This method of production has raised ethical concerns about the treatment of civets due to horrific conditions including isolation, poor diet, small cages and a high mortality rate. A 2013 BBC investigation of intensive civet farming in Sumatra found conditions of animal cruelty. Intensive farming is also criticized by traditional farmers because the civets do not select what they eat, so the beans are of poor quality compared to beans collected from the wild. According to an officer from the Traffic Conservation Program, the trade in civets to make Kopi Luwak may constitute a significant threat to wild civet populations. Although Kopi Luwak is a form of processing rather than a variety of coffee, it has been called the most expensive coffee in the world, with retail prices reaching a $550–700 per kilogram. The price paid to collectors in the Philippines is closer to $20 per kilogram. The price of farmed Kopi Luwak in large Indonesian supermarkets is from $100 per kilogram. Genuine Kopi Luwak from wild civets is difficult to purchase in Indonesia, and proving it is not fake is very difficult. There is little enforcement regarding use of the name Kopi Luwak, and there's even a local cheap coffee brand named Luwak, which costs under $3 per kilogram but is occasionally sold online under the guise of real Kopi Luwak. An investigation by People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals Asia found fraud to be rife in the Kopi Luwak industry, with producers willing to label coffee from caged civets with a wild-sourced, or similar label. A BBC investigation revealed similar findings. Kopi Luwak is produced mainly on the islands of Sumatra, Java, Bali and Sulawesi in the Indonesian archipelago. It is also widely gathered in the forest or produced in the farms in the islands of the Philippines, and in East Timor. Weasel coffee is a loose English translation of its Vietnamese name Cà Phê Cayenne, where popular, chemically simulated versions are also produced. History. The origin of Kopi Luwak is closely connected with the history of coffee production in Indonesia. In the early 18th century, the Dutch established the cash crop coffee plantations in their colony in the Dutch East Indies islands of Java and Sumatra, including Arabica coffee introduced from Yemen. During the era of cultistelsel, the Dutch prohibited the native farmers and plantation workers from picking coffee fruits for their own use. Still, the native farmers wanted to have a taste of the finned coffee beverage. Soon, the natives learned that certain species of musang or luwak consumed the coffee fruits, yet they left the coffee seeds undigested in their droppings. The natives collected these luwak's coffee seed droppings, then cleaned, roasted and ground them to make their own coffee beverage. The fame of aromatic civet coffee spread from locals to Dutch plantation owners and soon became their favorite. Yet because of its rarity and unusual process, the civet coffee was expensive even during the colonial era. Taste. Few objective assessments of taste are available. Kopi Luwak is a name for any beans collected from the excrement of civets, hence the taste may vary with the type and origin of beans ingested, processing subsequent to collection, roasting, aging and brewing. The ability of the civet to select its berries, and other aspects of the civet's diet and health may also influence the processing and hence taste. In the coffee industry, Kopi Luwak is widely regarded as a gimmick or novelty item. The Specialty Coffee Association of America states that there is a general consensus within the industry. It just tastes bad. A coffee professional cited in the SCAA article was able to compare the same beans with and without the Kopi Luwak process using a rigorous coffee cupping evaluation. He concluded, "It was apparent that Luwak coffee sold for the story, not superior quality." Using the SCAA cupping scale, the Luwak scored 2 points below the lowest of the other three coffees. It would appear that the Luwak processing diminishes good acidity and flavor and adds smoothness to the body, which is what many people seem to note as a positive to the coffee. Tim Carman, food writer for the Washington Post, reviewed Kopi Luwak available to U.S. consumers and concluded it tasted just like Folgers. Stale. Lifeless. Petrified dinosaur droppings steeped in bathtub water. I couldn't finish it. Some critics claim more generally that Kopi Luwak is simply bad coffee, purchased for novelty rather than taste. Massimo Marcone, who performed extensive chemical tests on the beans, was unable to conclude if anything about their properties made them superior for purposes of making coffee. He employed several professional coffee tasters in a blind taste test. While the cuppers were able to distinguish the Kopi Luwak as distinct from the other samples, they had nothing remarkable to appraise about it other than it was less acidic and had less body, tasting thin. Marcone remarked, "It's not that people are after that distinct flavor. They are after the rarity of the coffee." Production. The Luwak, Feta unregistered trademark SA small cat-like animal, gorges after dark on the most ripe, the best of our crop. It digests the fruit and expels the beans, which our farm people collect, wash, and roast, a real delicacy. Something about the natural fermentation that occurs in the Luwak unregistered trademark's stomach seems to make the difference. For Javanese, this is the best of all coffees. Kopi Luwak. Kopi is the Indonesian word for coffee. Luwak is a local name of the Asian palm civet in Sumatra. Palm civets are primarily frugivorous, feeding on berries and pulpy fruit such as figs and palms. Civets also eat small vertebrates, insects, ripe fruits and seeds. Early production began when beans were gathered in the wild from where a civet would defecate as a means to mark its territory. On farms, civets are either caged or allowed to roam within defined boundaries. Coffee berries are eaten by a civet for their fruit pulp. After spending about a day and a half in the civet's digestive tract, the beans are then defecated in clumps, having kept their shape and still covered with some of the fleshy berry's inner layers. Despite being in contact with feces and pathogenic organisms, the beans contain negligible amounts of the enteric organisms associated with feces. Moreover, the cherry, or endocarp surrounding the bean is not completely digested by the Luwak, and after being collected, the farmer performs thorough washing and removes the endocarp. Sumatra is the world's largest regional producer of Kopi Luwak. Sumatran civet coffee beans are mostly an early Arabica variety cultivated in the Indonesian archipelago since the 17th century. The major Sumatran Kopi Luwak production area is in Lampung, Bengkulu and Aceh, especially the Gayo region, Takengon. Tagalog Kapalamid comes from civets fed on a mixture of coffee beans and is sold in the Batangas region along with gift shops near airports in the Philippines. Vietnam has 2 farms with 300 wild civets in ʻu.aʔ, while in Mindanao Island of the Philippines, has 2 farms with 200 and 100 wild civets. But the archipelago of Indonesia, where the famous Kopi Luwak was first discovered and produced, is leading in supplying the world market for almost 3 centuries, where many small-scale civet farms are proliferating in the countryside. Several studies have examined the process in which the animal's stomach acids and enzymes digest the beans covering and ferment the beans. Research by food scientist Massimo Marcone at the University of Guelph in Ontario, Canada showed that the civet's endogenous digestive secretions seep into the beans. These secretions carry proteolytic enzymes which break down the bean's proteins, yielding shorter peptides and more free amino acids. The proteins are also involved in non-enzymatic Maillard browning reactions brought about later by roasting. Moreover, while inside a civet, the beans begin to germinate by malting, which also lowers their bitterness. Marcone also conducted an analysis on the volatile compounds which are responsible for the coffee's flavor and aroma, showing that there are significant differences from regular coffee. he concluded that protein structure had been altered, reducing bitterness and potentially impacting flavor. Volatile compounds had significant differences compared to regular coffee, indicating there are changes in flavor. According to Dr. de Villa-Cortez, the altered protein structure degrades the effective enzymes of the coffee as a diuretic. Imitation. Several commercial processes attempt to replicate the digestive process of the civets without animal involvement. Researchers with the University of Florida have been issued with a patent for one such process. According to the patent application, sensory tests were conducted and verified a significant reduction in bitterness. This technology was licensed to Coffee Primero. Vietnamese companies also claim to have replicated the digestive process with an enzyme soak. Imitation has several motivations. The high price of Kopi Luwak drives the search for a way to produce Kopi Luwak in large quantities. Kopi Luwak production involves a great deal of labor, whether farmed or wild-gathered. The small production quantity and the labor involved in production contribute to the coffee's high cost. Imitation may be a response to the decrease in the civet population. Animal welfare. Initially, civet coffee beans were picked from wild civet excrement found around coffee plantations. This unusual process contributed to its rarity and subsequently, its high price. More recently, growing numbers of intensive civet farms have been established and operated across Southeast Asia, confining tens of thousands of animals to live in battery cages and be force-fed. The conditions are awful, much like battery chickens, said Chris Shepard, Deputy Regional Director of the conservation NGO, Traffic Southeast Asia. The civets are taken from the wild and have to endure horrific conditions. They fight to stay together but they are separated and have to bear a very poor diet in very small cages. There is a high mortality rate and for some species of civet, there's a real conservation risk. It's spiraling out of control. But there's not much public awareness of how it's actually made. People need to be aware that tens of thousands of civets are being kept in these conditions. It would put people off their coffee if they knew. A 2013 investigation by People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals Asia found wild-caught civets on farms in Indonesia and the Philippines. The animals were deprived of exercise, a proper diet, and space. Video footage from the investigation shows abnormal behaviors such as repeated pacing, circling, or biting the bars of their cages. The animals often lose their fur. Tony Wild, the coffee executive responsible for bringing Kopi Luwak to the Western world, has stated he no longer supports using Kopi Luwak due to animal cruelty and launched a campaign called Cut the Crap to halt the use of Kopi Luwak. Farmers using caged civets in Takengon, North Sumatra, confirmed to the BBC that they supplied Kopi Luwak beans to exporters whose produce ends up in Europe and Asia. Price and availability. Kopi Luwak is one of the most expensive coffees in the world, selling for between $100 and $600 per pound in 2010. The specialty Vietnamese weasel coffee, which is made by collecting coffee beans eaten by wild civets, is sold at $3,000 per kilogram. Most customers are Asian, especially those originating from Japan, Taiwan and South Korea. Sources vary widely as to annual worldwide production. The price paid to collectors in the Philippines is closer to $20 per kilogram. Some specialty coffee shops sell cups of brewed Kopi Luwak for $35 a euro $80. Some coffee shops in Jakarta serve Kopi Luwak for $6 a euro 10. Variations. There are reports of a Kopi Luwak type process occurring naturally with muntjac and birds. In popular culture, in 1995, an Ig Nobel Prize was awarded to John Martinez of J. Martinez and Company in Atlanta, Georgia, for Luwak coffee, the world's most expensive coffee, which is made from coffee beans ingested and excreted by the Luwak, a bobcat-like animal native to Indonesia. Kopi Luwak is also mentioned in the bucket list as Carter Chambers reveals with great amusement of how the Kopi Luwak enjoyed by Edward Cole was produced. Eaten and defecated by a jungle cat. Cole reacted in surprise, "You're shitting me." And Carter replied in jest, "No, the cats beat me to it." Kopi Luwak coffee makes an appearance in History Channel's reality TV series, Pawn Stars, with several characters refusing to drink it after learning how it is made. In Franklin and Bash, Season 3 Episode 9, Shoot to Thrill, associate lawyer Germaphobe Pinder and his law partner Stanton Infeld each drink Kopi Luwak. After Pinder learns of the coffee's origin, he begins to vomit due to his extreme germophobia. In Season 3 of Jerry Seinfeld's web series, Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, Jerry and his guest, Jay Leno, both partake in a $75 cup of cat shit coffee. Leno proceeds to say it is awful. Jerry drinks his own coffee and later finishes Leno's, at which point it appears Leno has ordered a Coke. See also: Black Ivory Coffee, Indonesian cuisine, list of Indonesian beverages, Balinese cuisine, references. External links: ABC Australia Television, Sumatra Euro Extreme Coffee, ABC News : Story and photo report, BBC, civet coffee selling well despite SARS, BBC, report in the Philippines, CBC Car, article on cat poop coffee, Guardian, world's most expensive coffee tainted by horrific civet abuse, Life magazine slideshow, from civet poop to great coffee, University of Guelph, article on the effects of the digestive system on coffee beans, USA Today, article on civet coffee, Lam Dong has first farm producing weasel coffee in Vietnam, Lam Dong unregistered trademark s first weasel coffee farm opens in Vietnam, $2 million. Weasel coffee farm in Đà Lạt, Đà Lạt weasel coffee.